Don't you ever just wish there was another stacked basketball league we could watch aside from the NBA? One that even tried to be more entertaining and innovative. Well, we could have been in luck in the years 1967 to 1976. The American Basketball Association, or ABA, popped up as a rival league running in parallel to the NBA. It only ended because the NBA decided to merge with them. That move caused the implementation of newer styles and tactics. Gimmicks that the ABA invented, such as the three-point line and the dunk contest, are now staples of NBA history too. Most importantly though, the merger caused an expansion of new teams and new players to watch out for. But the near decade-long run of the ABA is now a forgotten piece of history. The NBA decided not to keep the records, statistics, and accolades that were made in the ABA after the merger. That choice has caused a substantial amount of great players to be criminally overlooked. Hi, I'm Red, and for this video, I'll try to shine a light on some of the all-time greats that you may have never even heard of. We'll be talking about the greatest players in ABA history. I'll be taking into account what their significance was to the ABA landscape. These players will also illustrate how the two rival leagues differ from each other. These guys will serve as the landmarks around a disregarded era that also happens to be one of the most important in the history of basketball. I think it would be nice to start at the end of the ABA. Rookie David Thompson only played in the ABA for the 1975-96 season, but it's one of the most single influential years in professional basketball history. You see, David Thompson was a two-time National Player of the Year in college, and declared for the draft with some intense hype from fans. So it was a huge deal when he was selected as number 1 overall in the 1975 NBA draft by the Atlanta Hawks. And then he decided to instead sign with the ABA's Denver Nuggets. It was a wake-up call for the NBA to realize they had to make this merger happen. It became even clearer once David Thompson justified all the hype. He took the Nuggets all the way to the ABA Finals, became Rookie of the Year, All-ABA Second Team, and the ABA All-Star Game MVP. He became an instant favorite for fans and fellow players. They called him Skywalker because of his crazy vertical ability. His uncontainable athleticism allowed him to score an efficient 73 points in a game without even playing much in the last 2 quarters. He is Michael Jordan's favorite player. He modeled his game after David Thompson and asked for him out of any player in history to introduce him at his Hall of Fame induction. The NBA immediately knew as soon as Thompson skywalked into the ABA court that they could no longer miss out on superstars like him. He was the final drop in the bucket that led to the merger in 1976. In this list, we're gonna get to all of those amazing stars that the NBA must regret they missed out on. Before we get to those players that defined the whole league, I'd like to shout out one more guy who also played for only a single year. I want to share the story of Spencer Haywood's single ABA season because it shows a technical difference between the two leagues, but also, it's just one of the most mind-blowing single-year performances I've ever learned about. Haywood had always really wanted to be in the NBA. They just had a rule that prohibited players from entering the league until his collegiate class had graduated. This guy was ready though. He was setting records on the US Olympic team at the age of 19. He also felt the desperate need to turn pro already. His mom was raising 10 kids by picking cotton in rural Mississippi. The ABA had a similar eligibility rule, but they made an exemption for Haywood. So he got his professional start there. And boy did he make the single year count. For the 1969 to 1970 season, Spencer Haywood averaged 30 points and nearly 20 rebounds a game, becoming both the number 1 scorer and number 1 rebounder in the league. The Rookie of the Year award was a no-brainer, but he also walked away with the MVP award. If the NBA had kept the records of the ABA, he would be considered the youngest winner ever at 21 years old. He was a workhorse, averaging 45 minutes per game to carry the Denver Rockets to what is still their best season while holding that team name. After the season, Spencer Haywood teamed up with the Seattle Supersonics, but on a different kind of court. Their antitrust lawsuit against the NBA went all the way to the Supreme Court and changed the league forever. Only then was he able to enter the NBA and impact it even further. At least that was a straightforward rule that only prevented Haywood from playing in the NBA for 1 year. It wasn't so easy for the now basketball legend Connie Hawkins. He was an icon while not even being in the NBA. He popularized New York City basketball in the streets, and became one of the players that built the legendary status of Rucker Park to a national scale as he put on shows with the NBA greats who wanted to play with him there. He himself wasn't allowed to be an NBA great though. As a gifted college player, he was placed in the midst of gambling scandals that plagued many schools. There was no proof he even had anything to do with those, and he was never even convicted. But he was blackballed by every college and the NBA. He had to become a professional through the Harlem Globetrotters, the ABL, and then the ABA, right when the league was born. Connie Hawkins became the first ever ABA superstar, winning the first MVP in history. He then led the Pittsburgh Pipers to a championship and won the playoffs MVP. The next year, he won the scoring title. His brief ABA career ended there as he finally had enough money to successfully sue the NBA for how he was unfairly treated. At this point though, he would be a 27-year-old rookie who had battled knee injuries, unable to soar to the same heights in the ABA. Hawkins remains the first great player to bring legitimacy to the ABA and make it look like a truly competitive league with tremendous talent. He set the table for the image of the ABA as the flashier alternative to the NBA. Connie Hawkins brought dunking artistry and streetball playstyles that influenced the entire league and wowed all the crowds. Another testament to the ABA being the flashier league was seen right there on their court. Before it was normalized, the beloved three-point line was an innovation popularized by the ABA. It was seen as too gimmicky by the NBA, not even immediately adopting it, even after the two leagues had merged. But the ABA was built different. They were always more open to fan-friendly ideas. Now we know that this one line brought so much intricacy to how the game is played. Every new aspect of the game needs an innovator. Way before Steph Curry, Reggie Miller, or even Larry Bird, the ABA superstar Louie Dampier had already been making it rain from three. At a time when the three-pointer was considered more of a circus shot, Louie Dampier made sure to constantly make the crowd roar with his long-range shooting and clutch ability. He was ahead of his time, attempting over 7 three-pointers per game in 1969. During that season, the league average was less than 6 attempts for an entire team. For a little more context, 2 decades later, Larry Bird was averaging less than 2 attempts a game for his entire career. Louie's numbers more likely resembled players from 5 decades into his future. The mark he made on the ABA will be remembered for even more decades, as he left the league ranked number 1 in both career points and career assists in ABA history. He played in every year the league existed, and all in one team. Before the Kentucky Colonels got discontinued at the NBA merger, Louie won them their first and only ABA championship. So now that we have a superstar talent who chose the ABA instead of just settling for it for a couple of years because of the rules, I'd like to introduce someone who is kind of a mix of both. Rick Barry has had a legendary career, with some messy parts to it that had a lot more to do with the rules and his personality, as his talent was unquestionable. He was drafted by the NBA's San Francisco Warriors, and right out of the bat, doubled their win total in his first season, winning him the Rookie of the Year trophy. The next season, he set his goals higher, winning the All-Star Game MVP and becoming the scoring champion of the NBA with an absurd 35.6 points per game. He was on the top of the NBA world the very next season as he averaged 40.8 points in the NBA Finals, a scoring record that no one has been able to match for decades. He was so peerless that Wilt Chamberlain said that they were throwing 3 defenders at a time for him in that final series. And that's kind of why Rick Barry decided to leave all this NBA stuff behind. He felt that he was not being paid nearly enough for carrying the entire franchise on his back. There wasn't really anything like free agency back then, so he jumped to the ABA's Oakland Oaks. They paid what Rick Barry thought he was worth. They even gave him a percentage of ownership and gate receipts. Plus, the coach turned executive there was his own father-in-law. Barry was heavily criticized for being a greedy trader. The US courts ordered him to sit out the entire 67-68 season for the Oaks because of a clause in his contract with the Warriors. As soon as he could play, he picked up where he left off. He won the ABA scoring title and soon won a ring with the Oakland Oaks, even if he was too injured to play in that championship run. Despite the success, the Oaks just could not survive while being the only ABA team to have to compete with an established NBA team within the same market, that being Rick's old team, the Warriors. Owner Pat Boone sold the Oaks, and they were relocated as the Washington Caps. Rick Barry despised this move and refused to meet with the team initially. Then he got a knee injury, so he missed the entire first 32 games, poking another hole into a supposedly great legacy. He still finished that season strong at the Western semifinals. He laid it out all on the line at Game 7, on the road when he dropped 52 points, a record that would still stand today if he did it in the NBA. His team had to relocate again, and he refused to show up again too. The Caps became the Virginia Squires, but this time they traded Barry to the New York Nets after he had made some negative comments about Virginia. You could still argue that his overall career in the ABA is pretty spotless. He was selected in the All-ABA first team every single year he was there, and became one of the greatest scorers in league history, as he averaged 30.5 points for his 4 years there. He also left the ABA as the most accurate free throw shooter ever, which is amazing because he shot them like this. So why did his successful stint there only last so short? Well, in 1972, a district court judge prohibited Rick Barry from playing for any team that's not the Golden State Warriors, because of the 5-year contract he signed back in 1969. Then he went back to the NBA and continued to do Rick Barry things, good and bad. You might think the NBA was the weaker league with how he came back and whooped everyone. He had one of the most absurd championship carry jobs when he won the 1975 finals through a resounding sweep while in full control of almost every possession. He seemed to have learned a thing or two in the ABA when he brought back some elite perimeter play and innovated the point forward archetype, which wasn't really a thing back then. The next season, they even had a chance to repeat, but in the midst of a 7-game Western Conference Finals series, Rick Barry infamously gave up on his team after some poor chemistry had finally boiled over again. As controversial as he was, he undoubtedly strengthened the ABA's case as a true rival league that basketball superstars can choose over the NBA to enhance their lives and playing careers. Aside from the NBA and ABA, there was another semi-professional basketball league in America. The Continental Basketball Association, or CBA, was trying to make it as another competitor from the 1969 to 1974 seasons. It was here when George Gervin got his start. That was only until an executive of the ABA's Virginia Squires witnessed what Gervin could do and immediately signed him. But the Squires never had stable finances and decided to trade this potential star for a lot of cash instead. The ABA actually tried to block this trade from happening, as they predicted what was about to happen. Virginia's team folded after losing their last exciting player. The San Antonio Spurs, on the other hand, gained a franchise player. They were transformed from a purely defensive-oriented team to an offensive juggernaut, solely by the presence of George Gervin. The defense was now emphasized by the exciting fast breaks that would follow. He could score at will. He had a smooth playstyle and was cool on and off the court, earning him the nickname Iceman. He popularized the finger roll and played with so much acrobatic flair that he solidified the ABA's image as the more entertaining league for fans. He was still building up to his prime when the NBA finally decided to force the merger. They decided that the Spurs had to be one of the 4 teams included because of how good the Iceman was at drawing in crowds despite San Antonio not being a huge market at the time. He actually got even better once he got into the NBA, winning 4 scoring titles and an added 9 more All-Star appearances to the 3 he had in the ABA. Even after carrying lackluster teams to some disappointing playoff runs, he stayed cool. Cool is definitely not how I would describe this next ABA great. Mel Daniels was a ferocious player. He would be growling as he fought for rebounds and swatted away shot attempts. He started his career already making statements. He became the first NBA first-round pick to instead go to the ABA by snubbing the more established league. Then he became the first ever Rookie of the Year in ABA history for the Minnesota Muskies. That team went through some financial difficulties, so they had to trade him to the Indiana Pacers, and that's when he finally started building something special. He became the league's most valuable player twice. He turned the Indiana Pacers to the most dominant ABA dynasty. They were in the finals for half of the ABA's existence and won the championship 3 times, the most out of any ABA franchise. The playoff MVP award always went to one of his higher scoring teammates, but he always gets credited as the leader of those teams. He was mostly relied on as their defensive anchor. He gets plenty of praise for his rim protection. We have to listen to that praise because sadly, blocks weren't officially recorded at the time. Good thing they already took note of rebounds though, because Mel was a 3-time rebounding leader and finished his career in the ABA with the most rebounds of all time. Because of all the similarities, I like to think of him as the Bill Russell of the ABA. The reliable big man who did all the things you needed for the foundation of a basketball dynasty. Mel differentiates himself with a fierce intensity in everything he did on the court. He also did not get as fruitful of a career in the long run. He was traded and then injured, and then got betrayed by the Memphis Sounds. He admitted that he had lost his passion for the game after that, and had promptly retired at the early age of 31. Like Bill, he found himself coaching after retirement. I guess he discovered a passion for the game once more, as he found himself now on the sidelines of the Indiana Pacers in the 1980s. But even before that, he was building something special again at Indiana State University, developing a young Larry Bird. Speaking of NCAA legends, this player was coming out of college hot from setting the record for the highest career rebounding average at an insane 22.7 per game, which is still untouchable to this day. Knowing this, it's kinda odd that the 7'2" giant, Artis Gilmore, fell to the 7th pick of the 1971 ABA draft. It's even weirder to see that he was drafted 117th by the Chicago Bulls in the NBA draft. Well, there's a decent explanation for that. All of the NBA teams knew that he would choose the ABA. Artis simply said he preferred the red, white, and blue of the ABA ball more.
The big question here is, why did you choose the ABA over NBA?
Well, I like the colors of the basketball.
You like that better?
Yes.
Kidding aside though, Gilmore was only going to a team that could actually afford to pay him. You see, he grew up not being able to afford clothes or a bed that actually fit his size. It's also crazy to imagine him playing football, but that's what he would have preferred had his family of 12 been able to pay for the insurance. The basketball thing seemed to have worked out for Artis though, when he ended up signing a 10-year contract for $2.5 million with the ABA's Kentucky Colonels. He proved that he was well worth the money too. In his very first year, he won the Rookie of the Year award and the MVP award. This was over some tough competition too. We'll get to him later. He went on to beat a lot of other ABA greats on his Wado Championship trophy and the Playoff MVP award in 1975. Artis Gilmore was consistently a force to be reckoned with, earning an All-ABA first-team selection for every year in the ABA, and being part of the All-Defense team for all years but one. His defense is easier to appreciate now that blocks were finally being recorded. He led the ABA in blocks per game and set the record for total career blocks. If the NBA had kept ABA records after they merged, Artis Gilmore would have been elevated from the top 26 to the top 4 slot in the all-time career blocks list. The same thing goes for his rebounds. He'd go from having only the 52nd most rebounds in history to the top 5 ever. He led the ABA in rebounding 4 straight times and grabbed the most rebounds in a single game with 40. Artis Gilmore wasn't just the most intimidating defensive stopper in ABA history. His overwhelming paint presence was felt on both ends. He was top 10 in scoring every single year, while also having the record for the highest career field goal percentage in ABA history. He did all that while starting his Ironman streak of playing 670 games without missing a beat. Having Artis Gilmore would be the surest bet you could make to win a basketball game. It's no wonder then that when the merger happened and there was the dispersal draft for the disbanded Kentucky Colonels, Artis Gilmore became the number 1 pick. In the end, the Chicago Bulls still got the player they drafted with the 117th pick years ago. He was even there when the Bulls finally found their next MVP, Michael Jordan. Now, you've probably been wondering, who was the Michael Jordan of the ABA? It's an easy answer, really. That's why we've saved him as the best for last for this video. Of course, it's really fairer to say that MJ was the Julius Erving of his era, since he was the one who pioneered the unrivaled level of winning, talent, box office, and recognition that made the stuff of legend. Julius Erving wasn't that known coming to the ABA though. He wasn't even a star in his obscure school varsity programs. That was clearly not the place for him when they decided to ban his signature move, the dunk. It was on the streets of New York when he started building his mythic status. That's where he earned many nicknames, none of which stuck as much as the Doctor, or Dr. J. On the pavement, he was like an uncaged bird. He was free to soar high for powerful dunks and acrobatic finishes. He may be the biggest reason why Rucker Park became such a nationwide phenomenon at the mecca of basketball, as even other pro players would visit just to experience playing with him. He went to the ABA because of those eligibility rules that the NBA had, but it also just made complete sense. The ABA branded itself as the more entertaining league. It had put more energy into a faster pace and a flashier style of play. It seemed like Dr. J was born to play there. The ABA even invented the slam dunk contest because they knew Julius Erving was the best representative of how their league was better than the NBA. Dr. J of course won this contest when he leaped from the free throw line to jam it in gracefully. One of the many things that Michael Jordan took after him. It's like Dr. J was made to do these spectacular things. He was 6'7", but with an enormous wingspan, gigantic hands, and an unbelievable vertical. These are the tools the Doctor used to innovate the simplicity of the dunk into the most exhilarating play in all of basketball. Every move on the court looked so natural to him. As a rookie, he got into the second team All-NBA in his first year with the Virginia Squires. You just know he's a great prospect when he causes a messy contract dispute between a corrupt agent and 3 different teams from 2 separate leagues fighting for the right to have him. It was the New York Nets that had ended up acquiring him from the previously mentioned financially irresponsible Virginia Squires. For his hometown team, Dr. J became the quintessential player any franchise would kill for. He won 3 MVPs, the most in ABA history. He carried the Nets to 2 championships as a 2-time playoff MVP. That's also the most in ABA history. As soon as he got to the Nets, he remained an ABA first team selection every year. He also became part of the all-defense team. He used his absurd arm length and hand size to pick some pockets and grab some boards. As much as he disrupted offenses, Doc was still very much seen as the most unstoppable offensive engine in the league. He won the scoring title 3 times. Heck, if his points were still in the NBA record books, he'd go from the 72 slot all the way to the top 8th all-time in scoring. In the ABA's final season, he made sure it was unquestionable who was the greatest ABA player ever. The Doctor finished in the top 10 in per game averages for points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, free throws made, free throw accuracy, 3-pointers made, and 3-pointer accuracy. After three-peating the MVP award, he still went into the playoffs motivated to make this the best year a basketball player had ever played. He reached the finals where he had to face off against the stacked Denver Nuggets team, who actually thought they had an answer for Doc in the form of Bobby Jones. He proved he was the best defender in the world when he won 8 consecutive first-team All-Defense selections in the NBA. The Doctor still crushed him. He averaged 37.7 points, 14.2 rebounds, and 5.3 assists. He led both teams in every major statistical category and was far and away their most productive player on the court. It was a performance the ABA had never seen before, and one that the NBA has barely seen since. Doc made sure the league went out with a bang. The merger itself is arguably his biggest accomplishment yet. Many consider him the biggest factor in the NBA believing they had to go through with the merger. Check out whose face was on all the publicity material when the merger was announced. The NBA just could not continue without having this guy on their own floor. He went on to accomplish everything an all-time great should. An NBA MVP, an NBA championship, a bunch of all-NBA team selections, and a bazillion more highlights for a much larger audience. He may not have reached the same incomparable heights from his ABA days, but barely anyone else has either. Dr. J said that a point of culture shock he had in the transition across the ABA and NBA was that his former league was more team-oriented. Instead of having individual stars trying to outshine each other, there was an elevated camaraderie between the players, where no one was left behind. It's sad then that I do have to leave out so many great players from this video. There's a misconception that there's only these handful of superstars that got their impressive stats and accolades because the rest of the ABA was weak. Truth is, there's a lot of great players that I had to cut for this video and a lot more stories that I don't even know about yet. So let me know if you want to learn more about that, and please feel free to share who are your favorite ABA players in the comments below. We have a couple more videos already that intersect with this time period of the ABA, so I'd recommend watching those to get a more well-rounded picture of this era. It's an under-discussed time period in NBA history, so we really love digging into it. If you're at all interested in that, then be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have a Patreon page where subscribers can voice out topics we can cover, as well as get automatically entered into future drawings. You can win jerseys, games like 2K and Madden, and even game tickets. So if you'd like to support our channel, also in other ways, then please like, subscribe, and share our videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.